Hello friends, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Michelle Fondon and I am the author of many books, and I'm showing you two today because they deal in particular with healing. This is The Wheel of Healing with Ayurveda, an easy guide to a healthy lifestyle, and Chakra Healing for Vibrant Energy, exploring your 7 energy centers with mindfulness, yoga, and Ayurveda. And all of these books are available in paperback, Kindle, and Audible books, and that's just one way in which you can support this YouTube channel. If you're new to my channel, welcome! Thank you for subscribing below. Click on that bell, scroll up to all for all notifications, and give the video a thumbs up. I do readings and coaching on all subjects: romance, life purpose, career, family, relationship. I do 30, 60, and 90-minute readings. And if you book a reading at my website, fondonwellness.com, for this week, each week we're doing a new charity during this time of quarantine. This week we are donating to NoKidHungry.org. I will donate $5 for every 30-minute reading book and $10 for every 60 and 90-minute reading booked. So you can go to my website and book that, and I will donate those proceeds, $5 or $10, depending on the reading, to NoKidHungry.org for this week. This subject is called Fear Not. God is in control. Now, I know, just as I mentioned about giving to charity for this time of quarantine, and during this time when so many people are in need of basic human needs like food, water, and shelter, and just general safety. And I believe that it is my job not only to help provide, because if I have something to give in the way of funds to help the organizations that are feeding hungry children, feeding families that may have lost their job or not able to go to their job during this time, and it is also my duty to help feed your soul. And this is part of my mission. It's part of my life purpose to also nurture and help to feed your soul. Now, when I come to you with this message, and this message took a while to compose, it's been in the back of my mind for a couple of weeks now, and I know this is a time when many of you, especially as we enter week 4 of this quarantine for many states, I know that it's easy for you guys to lose hope, and it can get super frustrating because you're like, when is this going to end? And it truly feels like that movie Groundhog Day, where you're just like, next day it's the same thing as yesterday. And it can just feel like you're a little bit caged in and you don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. And I bring you this message as a message of joy, and I bring you this message as a message of hope, faith, love, and happiness. And I believe that this is part of the journey that we are all learning in this together. So if you want to grab your coffee or tea, I've got my little lemon honey water to present this to you. I know that it's, like I said, in this time, it can be very tough. It can be tough to deal with all these fears that are coming up. It can be tough to deal with this level of uncertainty. And in addition to that, it's scary when you don't know the end result of things. It's diving into the unknown is incredibly scary. And part of my message here is to give you hope and to help you put things in perspective so that you don't live in fear. Now, in the Bible itself, do not fear or fear not are phrases that are repeated around 80 times or more in the Bible. Now, the Bible includes the Old Testament and the New Testament. For those of you that are not versed in the Bible or the Christian Bible, I know that the Torah, which is the first 5 books of what Christians call the Bible, is according to Jewish law, what they study as scriptures. And I'm going to quote a few quotes from the Bible in order to help you just to put things into perspective when it comes to fear. And the fact that fear is mentioned, or do not fear, is mentioned over 80 times in the Bible, it really goes to show that this is a constant human emotion. And it's a human emotion that is a natural factor of just being human. And when I talked about the virus in a previous video, this was a few weeks back, I believe it was around St. Patty's Day. So if you have not yet viewed it, you can go ahead and view it. I really talk about the fight, flight, or freeze response. And when I talked about that, I was really saying that it's a natural ability for humans to go into this fight or flight or freeze mode because it's been hardwired in our brain for millions of years. But the good news is what the Bible, what God is telling us is that there's no reason to fear. He's got it under control. And I'm going to read to you a few of these quotes. The first quote is from Joshua chapter 1, verse 9. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. For the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. This is from John chapter 14, verse 27. And this is Jesus speaking. Peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled and do not be afraid. This is from Matthew chapter 6, 24. Again, this is Jesus speaking. Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow has worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. These are from the Psalms. This is Psalm 34, verse 4. I sought the Lord, and he answered me. He delivered me from all of my fears. Psalm 27, verse 1. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? Finally, this is 1 John chapter 4, verse 18. There is no fear in love. Perfect love drives out fear, because fear has to do with punishment. The one who fears is not made in perfect love. When we ponder this concept of the natural human inclination toward fear, the natural human inclination toward survival, the natural human inclination to hunker down and take measures of security to secure one's own life. And we then live in this state of a near panic and anxiety because the fear is becoming a part of our daily living. And during a time where there's a national and international crisis, it is often easy to live in that fear, and it's often easy to feed on that fear and have that fear fed upon as we look at world events, as we look at the numbers, as we look at the news, TV shows, social media, everything. It's very difficult to break away from this sense of fear. God tells us to not fear. God tells us to lean upon Him for strength. God tells us to lean upon Him for courage. God tells us to lean upon Him for our salvation in all ways. God truly has this under control. And you might be saying, well, that makes no sense. Why would God allow something like this to happen? Why would God allow a pandemic to occur? Why would this be the case? I thought God was a loving God. I thought God represented unconditional love. Well, my dear friends, there's something that you do need to remember and keep in mind as we, as a part of humanity, as a part of a global collective, what we need to keep into perspective is that human beings, even though we were created in God's image and likeness, we are not the only creations of the universe. And I think at times, as humanity, we have a tendency to forget that. We do have a tendency to forget that we are not the center of the entire universe. Even though we are sentient beings, even though we have consciousness, we certainly are not the only ones here. And we have lived as a global collective as if we were the only ones here. We have lived as if we were the rulers of the planet and that nothing else around us really matters. And what I believe is that God being okay, because nothing happens without God's approval. Whether you believe that this comes from God or comes from humans in a lab somewhere or comes from Satan or comes from the underworld, whatever you truly believe, nothing happens without God's approval. Absolutely nothing in this whole entire universe happens without God's approval. And again, that goes back to the question of why. Why would God allow something with such devastating consequences happen on our planet? Well, if you look back in history and you look back in time and you even look back to biblical times, there were many disasters that happened as God was trying to guide his people to righteousness. And it was a redirection. It was redirecting them into a path that was more conscientious, a path that was more just for all, a path that was moving toward unconditional love instead of isolation, individuality, and selfishness, and really keeping in mind that we are not here alone on this planet, that we are not alone. So God created floods and disease and locusts and different things like that, so that humans could redirect their energies toward what was right, what was just, and what was in the greater good for all. If we're able to step back just for a moment, if we're able to look at the grander scheme of things, if we're able to look at the bigger picture for just a moment, you will see that the brilliance of this disease. I mean, in all honesty, guys, when I was growing up, and I mentioned this in the video where I spoke about the virus, and I don't want to say the word, and I'm staying away from saying the word because there's a lot of censorship going on YouTube, especially when you are mentioning the pandemic as its name. There's a lot of censorship going on. So I like where your video won't get recommended and there's no monetization, so it's not helping your channel in any way. So there's a lot going on in that way, and I just want this message of good news to get to as many people as possible, and I don't want it being censored for, reasons that the government has decided to put censorship in place. What I truly believe is that if you look at the things that were happening when I was growing up, as an example, and I mean, there was and one of my good friends, I'll put his link below because he's an astrologer. His name is James, and he's pretty brilliant, and he had a webinar this morning where he was going back into what was happening during the time where we have these planets that are conjunct, which we currently have now. And so there's a Saturn, Jupiter, Pluto conjunct that's happening till the end of the year. And this happened also in many time periods, but it happened also during the period of the Cold War, the heightened state of the Cold War. And that was in I believe it was 1981 to 1982. I was a child at the time, but I do remember we even did drills in school for a potential World War III. It was at the height of the nuclear weapons, building masses of nuclear weapons in Russia and in the United States. And it was a really scary time to be growing up. And when you think about what could have happened, when you think about a nuclear war, when you think about World War III, when you think about the devastation of something so massive that could have occurred and that ultimately didn't occur, but something of that magnitude. And then you fast forward to 2020, when we're dealing with this virus that is mild for most people. For like 98% of the population, it's mild if you get it. For the other 2%, it's extremely dangerous, but that's highly contagious. So we've got a mild virus for 98%, 2% it gets really serious, but it's super contagious. So you take this brilliance of this virus and like, would you rather have World War III with nuclear weapons flying about, potentially destroying the Earth? Or would you rather have this mild virus that's highly contagious and you're made to stay at home, I think I'd choose the virus over World War III. And of course, there were a lot of other devastations that have happened in time. So when we look at 9/11 and the fear of terrorism, and shortly thereafter, I was living in the Washington, D.C. area, which I know if some of you remember this that lived in that area during that time, it was a time of sheer terror. There was, for about 2 months, right after 9/11, there was some offshoots, I guess offshoot terrorists from 9/11. One in particular was driving around in a white van, shooting at people filling up gasoline at gas stations. It was a sniper. It was just, and you didn't know where this person was going to be, but it was a white van. There are white vans literally everywhere. And it lasted for about, I want to say 6 weeks to 2 months, but living in sheer terror of not knowing where this person was going to come from. But it was kind of all over the Washington, D.C. area, in Maryland, Virginia, and D.C. And just like in the aftermath of 9/11, and then having this sniper out that was just randomly killing people. It didn't matter who you were. It was just random. They would just shoot anybody at that particular gas station who was filling up gas. It was insane. The fear, the gripping fear that overcame that entire area. And I'll tell you, I was afraid. Like, I had small children at that time, and you had to get gas at some point. So it was super scary during that time. You think about the brilliance of God allowing this virus, this pandemic to happen, and you might be saying to me, like, well, Michelle, how can you say it's brilliant? Look at so many people that are dying. Look at all these people that have lost their jobs. Look at the financial devastation. I agree. I'm not disagreeing with you right there. But I believe it has come to the point where something needed to be done to change the trajectory of humanity. Something absolutely needed to be done, because the people in power all over the globe were not doing anything to change the trajectory of things. When you think about climate change and the fact that scientists, we're talking about people that have devoted their entire lives to science and climate change and have been analyzing things like glaciers and tornadoes and hurricanes and wildlife. Their entire lives, they've dedicated their whole lives to this. And they have been telling politicians for years now, something huge is going to happen, and like Earth probably only has another 50 years before it's like devastating consequences. And they've been completely ignored, 100% ignored. When you think about our wildlife, our plant life, and overfishing the oceans and the way we treat animals, especially for meat consumption, and just on and on and on, and like just the disparity between poverty and wealth, and wars and genocide and things like that. Like, nothing has been done, or very little has been done. For most of the globe, it all comes down to money, power, and politics. And that's really what it comes down to. And when we take a deeper look, because here's the thing, is that this causes us, like, this devastating, fearful thing has caused us to stop and pause. And if you think about the brilliance of what has happened, well, there are no wars right now, from what I gather and understand. If everybody is made to stay home, there aren't wars happening. There are no genocides happening. Children who have been ignored by their parents while their parents are too busy with their lives, and I'm not saying this is all parents, but many parents are too absorbed with their jobs to take care of their children. And now they're forced to be at home and take care of their children. Families are coming together and rallying together. And guess what? Our planet is healing. So when you look at the brilliance of this, I mean, God's amazing brilliance of this is that He didn't bring a flood. He didn't bring like a super deadly disease where it's killing off. Like, it could have been flipped, right, guys? It could have been flipped where this disease could have been killing 98% of the people and keeping 2% rather than making 2% really sick and 98% not so sick. You gotta look at it as that as well, is like it's actually quite brilliant. But what it's forcing us to do anytime we encounter fear, anytime we encounter devastation and uncertainty and darkness and despair, what God is asking us to do is to turn to Him for solace, to turn to Him for support, to turn to Him for guidance, to turn to Him for that everlasting love. There's an old adage. Now, I looked this up, and it's actually kind of an urban legend-ish phrase. It's not from the Bible. And what the phrase says is, God does not give you more than you can handle. And it is not biblical in any way. That phrase is not from the Bible. It's not biblical in any way. And I would even wager to say that God does give you more than you can handle, but God gives you more than you can handle so that you turn to Him, so that you are humbled to Him, so that you show humility to Him, so that you're not like, I'm the center of the universe. It's me. I am the center of the universe. I make everything happen. And God's like, well, no, not quite. That's not how this works. So when you reach points of extreme fear and devastation, and when you reach those points of desperation, it's time. I mean, it's time to turn to God. It's time to turn to Him for solace. And David, who became king, as some of you know in the Bible, David was the one who killed Goliath, the big giant. And I know that even if you don't know Bible stories or Bible lore, I'm sure you've heard of David and Goliath, but he was this short little guy who, and he was a kid at the time, who ended up with a slingshot, rock, ended up killing this humongous guy. But King David wrote many of the Psalms before he was king. It says in Psalm 34:4, as I read at the beginning, I sought the Lord and He answered me. He delivered me from all of my fears. And I sought, it's in that seeking of God. It's in that seeking of the Lord that He will deliver you from your fears. You need to seek Him first, though. It's not that you need to hunker down and do this all alone. God gives you these troubles to help build your character. God gives you these troubles to help build your strength, but not your strength in your own accordance. It's to build your strength in Him. It's to build your strength in seeking His will in everything that you do. And when you do that, it takes you out of that self-centeredness so that you can move forward and do what's right for others and do what's right for the world. And not only think of yourself and not only think of your own sorrows and pity and staying in fear. Because staying in fear does not help anybody. It doesn't help you. It doesn't help your family. It doesn't help you come to creative solutions so that you can learn and grow from this and other obstacles that may be in your path. Now you may be wondering, Michelle, what makes you such an expert on this? Like, what makes you someone who can speak about this? And I will tell you that my life has been riddled with more obstacles and pain than many people's lives. My life has pretty much been an uphill battle the entire time. Life has never come easy for me. Ever, never, 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 ever. I've always had to work really hard for anything that I've accomplished. I've always had a lot of difficulties in all relationships, with the exception of my children. My children have been lovely. There's been a couple points at which there were difficulties with each one of my children at different points in time, but that's part of life. But my life has been a constant uphill battle. Lots of obstacles and lots of struggles. Now, when you have a life like this, when you have a life that is not an easy ride by any measure, when you've had a life like that, where it's just every turn, there's another obstacle in your way. When you've encountered a life like that, you can take two sides. Like, you could be on one side or you could be on the other side. And the one side you can take is, oh my God, this sucks. Another obstacle in my path, another difficult relationship, another difficult time, another difficult financial struggle. Oh my God, and you stay in despair. The other side is to find the blessing in the struggle. And I have chosen, now maybe I've been blessed with faith and hope and optimism. I have chosen the path of finding the blessing in the struggle. I have been blessed with that. And that is what I have been doing for my entire life. It's not that I haven't encountered struggles or obstacles. It's not that I'm just happy all the time because my life is an easy ride. No, I'm happy all the time in spite of my life not being an easy ride. And you have to take the bad with the good, and you have to surrender to God. And I would wager to say that part of this lesson of fear not, God is in control, is to not only worship God in times of struggle, but to worship God in times of joy, and to be thankful and grateful in times of joy as well. And there are joyful moments in each and every day. And if you can't find those joyful moments in each and every day, and you can't find gratitude in each and every day, then you're not looking hard enough. You're seriously not looking hard enough. I will tell you a story from my past where it was during the time when it was after the dealing with thyroid cancer. And I was on this medication that wasn't quite working. It wasn't regulating my hormones, thyroid hormones, and then as a result, all the other hormones in my body very well. And the effect that it had on me was a lot of anxiety and a lot of depression. And those were two things that I had not encountered in my life prior to that. Now, everyone, kind of has a low level of anxiety sometimes, right? There are ups and downs in life, and sometimes that just happens. But for me, this was something that was much more devastating and a lot deeper than anything that I had ever encountered. Now, as I mentioned, I'm looking for the blessing. I'm looking for the solution in all of this. And at that time, I was in a very deep state of depression, and I was doing everything I could to get out of it. I did not feel that it was necessary to go on medication for that, because I knew it was thyroid related, and it was just trying to find the right doctor that could believe me. And that was a struggle in and of itself, which I finally did. And if you read the book, The Wheel of Healing with Ayurveda, it does explain that entire story. And it was just really bad. Like, I was in this deep, dark depression, and I was praying to God, I need a sign that I will get over this. I absolutely, positively need a sign, because I can't take this anymore. I can't take this level of sadness. I can't take this level of fear. I can't deal with this anymore. And I had responsibilities. I had 2 children at the time that were very young that needed me. They needed me to be present with them. And for some of you that have struggled with depression in your past, you know that when you're in a depressive state, it's very hard to be living in the present moment. And they needed me. They needed me to be present in the present moment. And I even remember with my youngest son, Matthew at the time, who's now the middle child, but Matthew was learning how to draw at that time. He was maybe 2, a year and a half to 2. And I remember hour after hour, I kid you not, drawing the sun. I was drawing pictures of the sun with a smiley face and posting them up in our kitchen, because I was just forcing my mind to just think sunny thoughts to try to just uplift my spirit. I was in this very dark place, this very devastatingly dark place. And it was just, I didn't want to live anymore. I was like, I can't handle this. I can't handle how dark this is. I can't handle the depression. I can't handle this. And I was just begging God for a sign. I was like, please, I need a sign. I need a sign that this is going to get better. I need a sign right now that this is going to get better. And I went out running And this was probably early spring. It was like winter-ish to early spring, and I was on this bike trail that kind of led into a forest. And it must have been still relatively cold outside because there was barely anybody on that trail. And I'm running and I'm praying. I'm literally running and praying. And I'm like, God, I need you to give me a sign. I need you to lift me up from this depression. And about 500 feet in front of me, this beautiful deer stepped out into the path, like blocking my path. And if you've ever encountered a deer, you know they're pretty skittish when it comes to humans, is that they might go out into the path, but as soon as you start moving toward them, they're running away pretty quickly. I mean, they're pretty stealthy. It's hard almost to see deer out in the open because they camouflage into the bushes and trees, and they're very skeptical, rightfully so, of humans. And this is kind of in a city. It's in suburbia, but it's, you know, a suburban city. So it's not like the deer would be safe like somewhere out in the country, which I don't know, with hunting, I don't know if they're really safe. But this deer was 500 feet in front of me in my path, just staring at me. And I'm running toward this deer, and this deer locked eyes with me and had a stare down contest with me. And as I'm running toward the deer, and this deer is staring at me, and I'm staring at the deer, tears just start streaming down my face. Because I'm getting closer and closer to this deer, and it will not divert its gaze, and it wouldn't move. And I'm like, this is a miracle. This is a sign that here I am running, not walking, not sauntering, but I am running toward this deer, and it's not moving. And as I just got almost to that deer, like we are talking a few feet from that deer, it finally just turned and like walked back into the forest. And I knew that was my sign. I knew it. I knew that was my sign. It was incredible. It was an incredible gift. And that is a representation for me of the immovable power of God, that it doesn't matter how much you are running from your problems. It doesn't matter how much you're trying to run from your pain. If you run toward Him, God is immovable. God is immovable, and He has got things under control, and He is with you through it all. You need to lean on Him for comfort and strength. And when you do that, the fear dissipates. It is amazing how that fear dissipates. It is just an incredible feeling. And I know that if you've put your faith and trust in God before, you know the feeling. You know the feeling of being lifted. You know the feeling of the anxiety is gone, the depression is gone, the fear is gone. And you just know, that you're being taken care of. You know that you're being protected. You know that you're being held and coddled by your Creator. And it's such an incredible feeling. And I will tell you that after that moment, things started to get better for me. After that moment, I found another doctor who believed in me. So it was all an orchestration of God's unconditional love. But it was me first putting faith in Him. It was me putting my hope and trust in Him. And it was me asking Him for help. Because you got to ask. So you might be saying to me, well, here is the issue, Michelle. This is something serious. This virus is something serious. And a little bit of fear, it's probably a good thing so that we stay steadfast to the guidelines of safety. So we stay steadfast to adhering to what our government is telling us, what our local governments are telling us. And I would say you can do that without fear. You can do that as respect to your neighbors, because as the Bible commands, love your neighbor as yourself. And your neighbors are not just the people to the right and to the left of you or above and below you if you live in an apartment building or condominium establishment, but it also extends to everyone else in your community and your collectivity. And I would say you need to show that respect, obviously. But the journey that I believe we're all asked to do, not through fear, but through faith and hope, is the deeper inner journey. And when we let go of fear, when we relinquish that fear, because we trust in our Creator, we trust that there is a purpose for this, what happens is it opens us up to so much more. It opens us up to creative solutions. It opens us up to brilliance. It opens us up to balancing our lives. It opens us up to asking the bigger and deeper questions that sometimes we're just too busy to ask. How do we take this deeper? How do we take our personal growth and our growth in helping and serving others? How do we take that to the next level? And that is truly what this is about. Can you imagine just taking it back to the brilliance of the virus? Is that if it was World War III, things would look totally different. They would look totally different. That would more be like if the virus was flipped, if it was killing 98% of the people and saving 2%. The brilliance of this is with this highly contagious but mild disease for most, it allows us in our quiet moments in this quarantine to go deeper into our beliefs, to go deeper into our spirituality, to go deeper into the major issues of our lives. And it calls us to go deeper. Get into prayer, get into meditation, ask God for guidance as to what He would like you to learn during this time for your individual life. What is your calling? What is your purpose? And you can only do that. You can only ask those questions when you stop letting fear rule your life. Thank you so much for joining me. Stay in faith, stay in hope, stay in unconditional love. Thank you for subscribing to my channel below. Click on that bell, scroll up to all for all notifications, and give the video a thumbs up. Thank you so much for sharing this video with others. Thank you for supporting this channel by buying a book or 2 or 3. You can also pledge your support on Patreon, www.patreon.com/Michelle S. Fondin, and I will see you in the next video.